Okay, so before we begin today's lesson, let's look at your anchor chart. It says, what is a fraction? Now this whole chapter is on fractions. The first two lessons you're like, but that was on factors and multiples and prime and composite numbers. What does that have to do with fractions? Well, when we get to the lesson on equivalent fractions, that's where you'll figure it out. Equivalent, simplifying, ordering, whatever. So when we get to, let's see, Thursday and on, then you'll see why we had to do factoring, multiples, and figure out if a number was prime or composite. But for today, we're just going to talk about a certain factors. We're going to be modeling factors. But first, what is a factor? Well, look at your sheet. It says it's part of a whole. Well, what does that mean? It means a number that expresses or tells, expresses also means tells, equal parts of a whole object or a set of object. So what that means is I have a pizza. It's cut into 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you'll notice you have a line, and underneath it says whole. Do you see the line where underneath it says whole? How many pieces are in this whole? There are 8. There's our whole. But I have eaten 2 pieces. So what part? Notice above the line it says part. I'll just tell you, just make sure you're listening. What part of the pizza have I eaten? I've eaten 2 out of the 8 pieces. So I've eaten 2/8 of the pizza. You can also use a fraction to say how much is left. Well, does my whole change? The amount that I started with, does that change? No matter what, with this pizza right here, I started with 8 pieces. So there are 8 pieces in this whole pizza. But instead of saying how many pieces I've eaten, which was 2, I'm going to say how many are left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which means 6 out of 8 pieces are left, or 6/8. Now notice, when I say the bottom number, I don't say 6/8. Eighths. I don't say that. I say 6/8. So whenever I say a fraction, and I'm saying the bottom number, I add a to the end. Unless, of course, it's the bottom number is 2, in which I say halves or half. Or if the bottom is 3, in which case I say thirds. There's no such thing as threeths. And I don't say 1/3, I say 1/3 or 2/3. Okay? There are 2 parts to a fraction. So look at the second part, parts of a fraction. The top number is the numerator. That's how many pieces of the whole you have. So my numerator, the top number, says how many pieces I have eaten. My numerator on this fraction says how many pieces are left. The bottom number is the denominator. They give you a little hint. You can't remember where the denominator goes. Well, denominator starts with the letter D, and so does the word down. The denominator is down below the numerator. So, remember, there's only 2 pieces. There's the numerator, there's the denominator. I can't really give you a good way to remember numerator, but just remember the denominator is down below the numerator. The denominator represents how many pieces the whole is broken into. So our whole pizza was cut into 8 pieces. So the bottom number tells you how many pieces are in the whole when you start. Before I started eating, how many pieces were in my pizza, class?
8.
8. So my whole pizza was cut into 8. So there's my denominator. Remember, numerator shows how many small pieces are there or gone, whatever you're looking at. The bottom number tells you how many pieces you started with in the whole. Now, keywords: halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, eighths. So it's just the denominator with th at the end, unless, of course, you have a 2, in which case you would say half or halves, or a 3 at the bottom, in which case you would say third or thirds. Because we know there's no such word as seconds or tooths. There is, but it doesn't mean 2. And there's no such word as threeths. So that's what helps you. Now, there are different ways to represent a fraction. You can either represent it as part of a group. Here we have 4 circles. Look at your page, not up here. The first part, we have 4 circles. 1 is shaded. 1 out of 4 is shaded, which means that fraction represents 1/4. So that's part of a group. 4 circles, 1 is shaded, 1/4 of the circles are shaded. In the second one, we have a number line. That's what we're going to be talking all about today. We see our number line has 4 equal pieces. Don't count the tally marks. Count the space between. So between the first 2 tally marks, we have 1 piece. Then we have a second piece. Then we have a third piece. Then between the last 2, we have a 4th piece. When you're using a number line to show fractions, you don't count the tally marks and find the first tally mark. You look at the spaces between. Then we have a fraction bar. I'm going to give you your own set of fraction tiles to use at school. You will not get to take them home. However, I will give you a sheet that you can cut apart to use at home. Okay? You'll cut it apart. I'm not cutting it apart for you. But it'll have all the fraction tiles on it. I will print it on chart paper, and then I will laminate it, and you can cut the pieces out. And then keep them in a Ziploc bag to use at home. Then we have fraction circles, which means we have 1 whole circle. It's broken into 4 pieces. 1 of those pieces is shaded, so 1/4 of the circle is shaded. Notice the difference between parts of a group and fraction whole, or parts of a whole. They are still the same fraction, but 1 out of 4 circles is shaded in the parts of a group, and 1 out of 4 pieces of a circle is shaded on the fraction circle, but it means the same amount. Okay, so now let's get to the lesson. Victoria asked on the fraction bar, were those little lines there an accident? I think what you're looking at is where it says 1/4. It's just really small. Is that what you were looking at? Like when you look closely, can you see that it's actually numbers, even though you can't really tell what they are? This is what the fraction bar looks like. It is 1 long rectangle. Do you see the long rectangle under the fraction bar? I see a lot of people writing their names instead of looking at the fraction bar. I know I told you to write your names, but remember, when I'm speaking, you're listening. Lena, did you get your hair cut?
Yeah.
Oh, I just noticed. It looks really cute. I think 4th grade is when I got my first big haircut. Okay, so do you see? Does everybody see the long rectangle underneath fraction bar? It is broken into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces. My pieces are not equal because I am not able to really do that, but I do have magnetic fraction tiles and fraction circles that we will use, but I'm not going to use them today because we're focusing on a number line. So do you see how it's broken into 4 pieces, and then it has those little very, very, very blurry 1/4 labels? They're very blurry. You probably can't tell that they say 1/4, but you should be able to see that they are numbers of some sort. It says 1/4 because each of those pieces is 1/4. So if I shade one of those pieces, I've shaded 1/4. If I shade two of those pieces, how many fourths have I shaded? Class?
2/4.
2/4. If I shade three of those pieces, how many fourths have I shaded?
3/4.
3/4. And then we're not going to talk about all four of them because that is a lesson for tomorrow. Okay, now everybody should now be finishing up their name on the top of their math book. And then let's look at the building. Finish writing your name, number, and date, and then put your finger or pencil on the build it. When I see your finger or pencil, when I see everyone's finger or pencil on the build it, I will continue. Zara, are you on a laptop today? Oh, are you able to tilt it down just a little? Because then I can see a little more of what you're working on. I can see your face very well, but if you tilt it just a little, then I can see some of what you're working on.
It'll fall and then it'll fall flat on the screen.
Okay, that's okay. Just don't tilt it anymore back, okay? Okay, when I see everybody's finger or pencil on the build it, I will continue. Okay, this says represent the fractions 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3 on a number line. So, step one is we start at the left. Give me a thumbs up if I'm pointing to the left. Give me a thumbs down if I'm not. Try not to show anybody else. Try to make it secret because a lot of you like to look at other people to see what they're doing. No, this is the right. Use your fingers. It is okay to use your fingers. I will tell you right now, I was at a wedding on Saturday and they told me, are you with the bride or the groom? And I said, I'm a friend of the bride. And they said, okay, go to the left. And I literally did this and went this way. Because I'm not good with my right and my left. So it is fine. And then the guy was like, stop, you're going, telling you, use your fingers and it will help you a little bit. So we,
Miss Lois,
yes.
did you mean my right or your right?
So right now, this is the left. So yours, whatever, anytime I ask right or left, I'm asking yours, not mine. Okay, because mine's gonna be opposite. But I'm asking yours because you're the one doing this lesson, not me. Okay. So right now, we start at the left and we place a 1/3 fraction tile. Now the fraction tiles I have for you are too big to do that on here. So then they don't quite work because they're too big because they cover like this much of it and that's not helpful. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at these outlined fraction tiles that they already have. Remember our 1/4 fraction bar or fraction tiles. How many pieces was it broken into? Our fraction bar. Carla.
It was broken into 1/4.
How many pieces was it broken into? Zadie?
4 pieces.
4 pieces. So our denominator, our bottom number was what, Zadie?
4.
4. So here, let's look. This is our fraction bar. You can go ahead and trace it. Not each line, look at what I'm tracing. You should only be tracing that. Notice how I did not trace these middle ones. That's our fraction bar. How many pieces is it broken into? Let's look. Finish shading and then finish tracing and then look up. Let's count how many pieces it's broken into. That means we're counting between each dotted line. 1, 2, 3. How many pieces is my fraction bar broken into? Class? 3. So I have my fraction tiles. Remember, the number on the bottom is how many pieces are in the whole. So in our whole fraction bar, there are 1, 2, 3 fraction tiles. So my whole fraction bar is broken into 3 tiles. So my denominator, the number down below, is 3. Now let's go back. It says put a 1/3. Remember, each of these represents 1 out of 3, or 1/3. So, I know if I am tracing one 1/3 tile and then shading, I'm only shading 1 out of these 3 pieces. Out of these 3 pieces, how many have I shaded, class? 1. Remember, my numerator represents how many pieces out of the whole are shaded. Since 1 out of 1, 2, 3 pieces are shaded, I have shaded 1/3. Now, notice, we have our 1/3. We have our number line, sorry. Do we count the tally marks? What have I been saying all morning? Do we count the tally marks, Aaron? No, we count the spaces between the tally marks. So everybody, put your left hand on the first tally mark. Notice it says 0 below it. Put your right hand or one finger from your right hand underneath the second tally mark. Notice how it says 1/3 below it. This is one piece. Between the first tally mark labeled 0 and the second tally mark labeled 1/3, that is one piece. 1 out of 3 pieces is what fraction? Raise your hand. Smith.
1/3.
1/3. Now, let's look at number 2. It tells us to place a second and third 1/3 tile above the number line next to the shaded figure. Trace the lines, then shade the figures. But remember, your fraction tiles are way too big. So we're just going to look. We have 1 shaded. Now we have to shade a second spot. Now, please be neat. Fill it as much as you can. But in this case, please don't try to fill every single inch, because every single millimeter, because then we will never have enough time to finish. So now I have shaded 2 of my tiles. How many tiles did I start with? Lena?
3.
3. So it says, what fraction do the first 2 shaded areas represent together? Well, I know I started with 3. So my denominator is the pieces of the whole, that's 3. The top number, the numerator, tells me how many I've shaded. Well, if I have 2 fraction tiles shaded, how many out of 3 are shaded? 2. So Lena, right now, if 2 of them are shaded, what fraction is shaded?
2/3.
2/3. Very good. Now, I'm going to shade another fraction tile. And I'm going to ask you the same question. It says, what fraction do all 3 shaded areas represent? Well, how many did I start with? Carla,
3.
do I put that 3 that I started with in the spot for the numerator up top, or the denominator down below?
You put the 3 at the bottom of the fraction.
What is that math word?
The denominator.
The denominator. So that's how many I started with. Now, I have to put how many I've shaded. Where does the number of pieces I've shaded go? On the top in the numerator spot, or down below in the denominator spot?
The numerator.
The numerator spot. And what fraction does that represent? If 3 out of 3 pieces are shaded, what fraction does that represent? How do we say that fraction?
3/3.
3/3. Very good. So, how many parts does each fraction represent? 1/3 represents 1 part. Remember, we looked. Between the 0 and that first tally mark, we had 1 shaded. Now, if it's 2/3, put your left finger on the 0 and your right finger on the 1, 2, the end of the second part. 2/3 represents how many parts? 1 between the 0 and 1/3, and then 2 between the 1/3 and the 2/3. So 2/3 represents 2 parts. Now 3/3. Well, put your finger on the 0, your left finger on the 0, and your right finger on that 3/3. Notice how we see the outline of a 1. I wonder what that means. We'll find out tomorrow. How many pieces do we have shaded? Well, we have 1 between the 0 and 1/3, 2 between the 1/3 and the 2/3, and then 3 between the 2/3 and the 3/3. So if we have 3/3, we have 1, 2, 3 hearts shaded. So everybody look. This between the 0 and the 1/3 represents 1/3. This between the 1/3 and the 2/3 also represents 1/3. This between the 2/3 and the 3/3 represents 1/3. So each of these pieces between the tally marks is 1/3. But when you start putting them together, now I have 2/3. Now I have 3/3. So if my finger doesn't move from the 0, I start adding together how many tiles I have to get the numerator. But if my fingers move like this, then I have 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Does everybody see the difference between 1/3, Zadie, can you see? 1/3 and 3/3. 1/3 is only one part, even though I'm looking at the last part. 3/3 is all of them together. Okay, any questions, or are you ready to move on to the next one? Okay, helper number 1, please sanitize, erase, sanitize. Okay, everybody, finger or pencil on the try it. Read in your head while I read out loud. Locate the fractions 1/3 and 2/3 on the number line. Okay, let's look at our number line. We don't have those guides below to tell us. So we have to figure out what goes in these boxes. Well, step 1. One endpoint of the fraction tile that represents 1/3 is at 0. Does everybody see it? One endpoint. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that tally mark. That shows us the beginning of our number line. We start our number line at 0. We will not be working with negative numbers until you're in middle school. So no, until you start learning negative numbers, the beginning of all of your number lines is 0. So we're making, a tick mark, not a tally mark. I'm sorry, it's a tick mark. It looks the same as a tally mark, but the difference is a tick mark is on a number line. So we've added our first tick mark. We're going to label the fraction. Well, if we're at the very beginning, do we have any thirds at all? No. Now, wait, I'm confused. Okay, so now we have our 0. Let's go ahead and shade our let's go ahead and trace our first fraction tile. We just shaded our first fraction tile. This represents how many? Between the 0 and the end of the fraction tile, where we put a tick mark at the other end. So put a tick mark at the other end of the fraction tile. And this represents how many? Carla?
1/3.
1/3. So we have one fraction tile. Therefore, we have 1/3. Now, we need to trace a second fraction tile. We just traced a second 1/3 fraction tile. Is the end, then we're going to put our tick mark at the end of the fraction tile. When we label the number line, not the fraction tiles. They already have our fraction tiles labeled for us. Notice that. The top shows the actual fraction tile. This is only 1/3, 1 out of 3. This is only 1/3, another out of 3, but still just 1. This is just showing 1 out of 3. But at the bottom, we have to say, okay, how many pieces from the beginning? So here was just 1 out of the 3 that we're going to end up with. But to here, we have how many out of the 3 we're going to end up with? Michaela? 2 out of the 3 we're going to end up with. So when I'm asking you how many out of the 3, you don't tell me 2/3, because there's no such thing as 2/3 thirds. You just tell me 2, which represents what fraction, Michaela? 2/3. So there's where the 2/3 come in. When I ask you what is the fraction, that's where you say 2/3. But if I'm saying how many out of 3, you just tell me how many out of 3. So 2. Okay. So everybody notice, when we have one fraction tile, we just have 1/3. But if we have 2 fraction tiles, we have 2/3. Now, let's add a third fraction tile. And let's put a tick mark at the end of that fraction tile. I know each of these tiles represents 3, which means my whole fraction bar is broken into 1, 2, 3 pieces. When I had 1, it ended at 1/3. When I added a second, it ended at 2/3. Now, when I add a third fraction tile, I end at, Cullen, what fraction do I end at? 3/3, because I have how many out of the 3 whole fraction tiles, Cullen? 3. Good. So does everybody understand how to label the fractions on a number line? We start at 0. Each tick mark tells us how many of those tiles we are away from 0. Here we're one out of 3 tiles away from 0. Now we're 2 out of 3 tiles away from 0. Now we're 3 out of 3 tiles away from 0. Okay. I think we're going to skip the talk about it, and we are going to do a couple of the practice it together. I think we're going to do number 4, 6, and 9 together. So one from each section. So let's skip the talk about it and now look at the practice it on the next page. Okay, number 4. It says, label each unknown with the fraction of the whole that it represents. So let's look. This number line, we're filling out the top. Remember, the top has these little mustache-looking things. That means it's only asking us what each piece between the tick marks mean. So that means, use your fingers. 0 to the first tick mark represents 1/6. The first tick mark to the second tick mark represents 1/6. The third tick mark to the fourth tick mark represents 1/6. The fourth tick mark to the fifth tick mark represents what? Raise your hand. Zari.
1/6.
1/6. Because, oops, this is the bad one. Look at the little mustache below. It only goes from the fourth tick mark to the fifth tick mark. So it's only asking us, what is this part of the fraction between these 2 tick marks? Well, it only represents 1 out of every piece. So it's 1/6. If we count each piece, so look at each mustache. I have 1 mustache, 2 mustaches, 3 mustaches, 4 mustaches, 5 mustaches, 6 mustaches. I have 6 mustaches. So that means I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. That's why our denominator is 6, because there are 6 pieces. Each piece represents 1 out of the 6 total pieces. So that is why each piece is labeled as 1/6. So, figured out between the 4th and 5th tick mark, that's just 1/6. Between the 5th and 6th tick mark, that's 1/6. Now, between the 6th and the 7th tick mark, it represents what? Raise your hand. Come on, boys. You can do this. Follow the patterns. If you're not listening, you can't. But if you're listening, follow the patterns. I'm going to say it again because I want a boy to answer me. Between the 1st and the 2nd tick mark, I have 1/6. Between the 2nd and the 3rd tick mark, I have 1/6. Between the 3rd and the 4th tick mark, I have 1/6. Between the 5th and the 6th tick mark, Zari told me I had 1/6. Between the 6th and the 7th tick mark, I have 1/6. I'm sorry, between the 5th and the 6th tick mark, I have 1/6. So between the 7th and the 6th, the 6th and the 7th tick mark, I have, Kingston, 1/6. Because this little mustache is only pointing between these 2 tick marks. You're doing number 5 the same way. So what I'm going to have you do is take the next minute, which it shouldn't even take a minute, to label these. Pay attention. Where is the mustache pointing? Is the mustache pointing to only 1 out of the total pieces? Or is it pointing to more than 1 out of the total pieces? When you're done, put your pencil down and look up. Make sure that you're not just following patterns, that you're also paying attention. Are we working with 6ths here? If we're not working with 6, should there be a 6 in it in the denominator space? Count how many pieces there are between the tick marks. Here's 1. Here's 1. Here's 1. How many is that? Where does that go? In the denominator spot or the numerator spot? Now look where the mustaches are. How many is that? How many is that? How many is that? Give me a thumbs up when you're ready to move on. And we can't do every independent practice like this because we just don't have time. But we're moving at a decent pace, so we can do that with this one. Okay, if I don't see your thumb, I don't know if you're ready, and I'm waiting for you. Okay, let's look at number 6. Number 6, look at the difference between the question or the instructions. This one said label each unknown with the fraction of the whole. Put a box around fraction of the whole. That represents how much out of the whole thing is each little mustache representing. But now we are labeling the fractions on the number lines between 0 and 1. Look at the difference. Fraction of the whole, that means how many out of the whole thing is each mustache referring to. Label the fractions on the number line means what does that piece represent? Or I'm sorry, what does that tick mark represent? How many are there from 0? If you're labeling the fractions, you're looking how far away from 0 is that tick mark. So, first we have to find out the denominator. Now there's an easy way to do that, but that's not going to help you with how to do it later. So let's do not the hard way, but the better way first. We're going to put our finger on the first tick mark and the second tick mark. How many pieces do we have between those tick marks? Victoria? 1. Now, let's put our finger on the second tick mark and the third tick mark. How many pieces is that? Smith? 1. Now add them together. 1 piece plus 1 piece equals how many pieces? Cullen?
2 pieces.
2. So how many total pieces is this number line broken into?
2.
2. Which means 2 goes in the numerator spot or the denominator spot? Denominator. 2 goes in the denominator spot because that's how many pieces our whole is broken into. Here's, our whole between 0 and 2 halves. Notice the little 1. That must mean, this is 1 whole, right? 1 whole. But we have 1 piece and then 2 pieces to get 1 whole or halves. So we know when we did the, the try it? Yes, the try it. When we were labeling the bottom, we said our numerator was, okay, how many pieces away from our 0 is that tick mark? Well, here's our 0. Here's our tick mark. How many pieces away from 0 is that tick mark? How many pieces away from 0? Zadie?
1.
1. So I put a 1 in my numerator spot. But if I keep my left finger at 0 and go to the third tick mark, how many pieces away from 0 is that? 1 and Lena? 2. Keep that in mind. Let's do number 7 together too. And then you'll do number 8 on your own. When we're looking at the fractions, we're labeling the bottom. We're seeing how many pieces away from 0. So we're putting our left hand on 0 and we're leaving it there. But let's count how many pieces first. Put your finger on the first one and the second tick mark, and we have how many pieces, class?
1.
Move to the next one. How many pieces? 1. How many pieces?
1.
How many pieces?
1.
1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is
4.
So how many pieces is our whole number line broken into, class?
4.
So our denominator is
4.
We can just go ahead and do that. We also see 4 and 4. However, just by going, okay, 4 and 4, that means 4 goes here. Is that going to help you know how to do it once you get here if you don't have anything labeled? No. Count how many pieces there are first. So put your fingers and move them. Count how many pieces are, then add them together. We have 1 piece, another piece, another piece, another piece. That's 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4. So, now we need to look. Now's where we're going to put our left finger on 0, and our right finger is what's going to move. I'm keeping my left. I'm gluing it to 0. They already have this. I'm 1 tick mark away from 0, so that represents 1/4. Now I'm how many tick marks away from 0? Carla?
2.
So this tick mark represents
2/4.
2/4. My left finger is glued, but I'm moving another tick mark away with my right finger. How many tick marks away from 0 am I now? Michaela?
3.
So this tick mark represents
3. 4.
This tick mark represents what fraction?
3/4.
3/4. My left finger is still glued. My right finger moves 1 tick mark over. Now how many tick marks am I from 0? See, there's a few people that have not answered, and I would like them to be answering. Victoria? How many tick marks away from 0 am I? Here I was 1 tick mark away. Now I'm 2 tick marks away. Now I'm 3 tick marks away. So now I am 4 tick marks away, which represents what fraction? 4/4. Or 1 whole. We'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow. Okay, number 8, do it on your own. Then give me thumbs up. Please make sure that you are really paying attention. I see a lot of you just following the pattern, not understanding why it is the pattern. I see that Lena is really trying because I see her fingers working. I see her fingers moving. Some of you, I just saw you go, okay. Well, yeah, you're following the pattern, but if you don't know why, then the apply it and the homework are going to be a lot harder. Okay, when I see your thumb, I know that we're ready. Okay, let's look at the last part on this page. Write the point that represents each fraction. So, we have point A, point B, point C, and point D. Let's label each point first. That way, when we go to answer the question, we know there's no way that we're wrong. We're going to label the point first, which means when you get to number 10, what are you going to do first? Colin?
You're gonna label each point.
You're going to label each point. So, A. Well, we know A is 0 because the first tick mark on a number line represents what number? The first tick mark on a 4th grader's number line will always represent, Carla? 0. The first point on a 4th grader's number line will always represent 0. The first tick mark on a 4th grader's number line will always represent
0.
Repeat the whole thing.
0.
The whole thing.
On a fourth grade number line, the first
Don't listen to anybody else. Just say it. Don't listen to anybody else. Everybody, put your fingers in your ears. I'm going to say it one more time. So take them out. Sorry. I'm going to say it one more time, and you're going to repeat with your fingers in your ears. So take your fingers out. The first tick mark on a 4th grader's number line represents 0. Put your fingers in your ears.
the first tick mark in a fourth grade number line is 0.
Okay, I hope everybody said it. Okay, so we don't have to label that one. Now, to figure out the rest of them, well, first we have to figure out our denominator, right? Which means we're going to move our fingers. We're going to count each piece. So between the first and second, we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That means 1 plus 1 is
2.
plus 1 is
3.
plus 1 is
4.
plus 1 is
5.
plus 1 is
6.
So that means our whole number line is broken into how many pieces, class? 6. So that means the denominator for each of these fractions is what, class?
6.
Now to get the numerator, we figure out, okay, how far is that tick mark from the 0? So we're going to glue our left finger to the 0 tick mark. And then our right finger is going to move. So right now I'm 1 tick mark away. So I'm at what fraction? Class?
1/6.
1/6.
Now I'm 2 tick marks away. 1, 2. So I'm at what fraction?
2 6.
Now I'm 3 tick marks away. 1, 2, 3. So I'm at what fraction?
3 6.
Now I'm at 4 tick marks away. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm at what fraction?
4 6.
Now I'm 5 tick marks away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm at what fraction?
5 6.
Now I'm at 6 tick marks away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm at what fraction?
6
6,
6.
6. Or the number, class? 1. Notice how every time we're at 1, the numerator and the denominator are exactly the same. Okay, so now I know I'm looking for 2 6. So 2 6 is represented by point A, B, C, or D. Mason. C. Because Mason, A is what? 0. B is what? C is what? And D is what? 6, 6, what? Not 6 and 6. How do we say that fraction? Say it the same way we did all the others. Mason, listen to Cullen. Cullen, how do we say that fraction?
6 6.
6, 6, just like all the others. So D is represented by what point, Mason? 6, 6. Or, Lena? 1. So that means if we're looking for 2 6, then it is C. Okay, go ahead and do number 10 on your own. What are you going to do first? Carla?
Take the little finger and put it on.
So but what is the whole thing? What are we trying to do by moving our fingers around? Class, what are we trying to do by moving our fingers around?
See
Lena? Lena?
See how
Nope. Victoria?
to see what the
Smith?
label the point.
Label the points. That's the whole point. You were about to tell me more ways to label the point. We're moving our fingers around first to figure out what our denominator is by counting each piece. Then again to see what our numerator is by gluing our left finger to a place and then counting how many tick marks away. Go ahead and do that. Label each tick mark. Not just each point, but each tick mark. And then answer the question. Give me a thumbs up when you're done. Label each tick mark first. Use your fingers to help you. Then answer number 10. Give me a thumbs up when you're done. Just on your desk so that nobody feels pressure. Don't look around. I said just on your desk so that nobody feels pressure. See everybody's thumb up on their desk. We will continue. On your desk so nobody feels pressure. Okay. Now let's look at, we're just going to look because you're going to do this on your own. You've done all that page together. Now look at the apply it. Oof. You have no labels other than the very last one. So what do you need to do first on numbers 11 through 13? Zari?
We need to label.
Label what? Each
Each inch. No.
starts with a T. Sounds like Talk's brother's name.
Tick mark.
Each tick mark. Now, you're labeling the fractions. When you're labeling tick marks, you're labeling each fraction. If you're labeling mustaches, we don't need to worry about the math word for that because I'm not really sure what it is. I think it's a bracket. It's not a bracket, actually. If you're labeling the mustache, then you're labeling the fraction of the whole. If you're labeling each tick mark, you're labeling the fraction. So that means for numbers 11 through 13, you're reading the word problem and then doing this. So does everybody understand what to do for numbers 11 through 13? You need to label each tick mark, but then you need to plot where the fraction is. So not only are you doing that, but the problem is going to tell you something that leads you to say, okay, am I plotting or putting my dot at 1/4? Does the question ask me to put my dot at 2/4? Or does the question ask me to put my dot at 3/4? Or maybe even do I need to plot or put my dot at 4/4? Okay? So for numbers 11 through 13, not only are you doing this, but then you also have to figure out, okay, where does the dot go? Where do I plot that fraction? Is it telling me that there are 4 boys in the class and 3 of them are wearing shorts today? In which case, how many boys are wearing shorts? If 3 out of 4 are wearing shorts, how many are wearing shorts? Lena?
3/4.
3/4. So not only are you labeling each tick mark, you're also plotting or putting the dot on the tick mark where it needs to go. Remember, when we label on number lines, we put the dot like right in the middle. Not above, not below, but right in the middle. Okay? So it's like a little cross. You put the dot right in the middle if you're plotting. Number 14. Well, you have to create your own number line. Where does every 4th grader's number line begin? Class? At 0. So you can go ahead and put your first tick mark and put 0. The rest of it, you're on your own. Number 15 is a critical thinking question with words. Then, your homework. You're doing the same things. I don't have it up here, but you're just doing the same things. So when you're on your homework, be looking at it. Be looking at your guided practice and your examples and everything. And find the problems that match what it looks like on the homework. Does everybody understand? Okay, go ahead. You only have one side to do, so I'm only going to give you 15 minutes. If you have a question, you may come to me.